Today, we're going to talk about 4 steps to delegate effectively and simply. Listen in. Who is this episode for? Well, if you are a law practice owner with at least one employee, or maybe you're considering hiring your first, but you've been putting it off, this episode is for you. It's also for partners or associates who work with assistants or other associates, but aren't currently delegating tasks, or at least not delegating enough of them. Maybe because you're afraid you won't get quality work or it won't be done fast enough. And you already know that you can't do it all, no matter how hard you try. So today, I'm going to start showing you how to delegate simply and effectively. You're going to have more confidence delegating, and you're going to learn how to do it in a way where you can maintain quality control. Each lawyer that I work with starts out with one goal, and it's probably a goal that you have too: freedom. Freedom to do more of what you want to do and less of what you don't. And that requires learning how to create more time. That extra time not only allows you to do more of what you love and less of what you don't when you do this right, but it also translates into things like increasing your revenue. Thinking more strategically about your practice because you have time to do it allows you to do things like that. And all of that means more freedom too. And each skill you develop, including delegation, builds on the next, creating a compound effect in your practice, a compound effect that begins with learning the skill of making more time. Delegation is one lever that you have to help you create the time and the financial abundance that you want. But I know that there's a part of you that thinks delegation is more hassle than it's worth sometimes, right? Even those tasks you know that you should be delegating, you might be thinking, no one can do these tasks as well as I can. And this keeps you stuck on the hamster wheel, spending hours each week doing work that you should not be doing, work that keeps you from your zone of genius. And you might be telling yourself, I'm the only ones that can do things right. Or maybe you've told your assistant how you want things done multiple times and it's still not getting done the way you want it to, but you've got to figure it out. And how do you do that? Well, I'm going to show you how to overcome these hurdles to grow your law practice. Before we jump into the 4 steps, let's talk about overcoming the fear of delegation, because that fear is real, my friend. That fear holds lawyers back. And that fear is lawyers feeling that if they don't handle every detail, that things are just going to fall apart. It's a mix of perfectionism and control. And I get it. You've built your reputation on getting things done right. But the truth is, trying to control everything is what is keeping you stuck. Trying to make everything perfect keeps you stuck. For example, one of my clients didn't want to delegate intake calls because she thought that no one could connect with clients the way that she could. But after training her assistant, she realized the calls were being handled just as effectively by her assistant, and she gained back hours each week. This doesn't happen overnight. You've got to learn this process that I'm going to share with you, and you've got to really implement it and address all those fears because they are going to come up. Delegating effectively requires you to shift your mindset from only I can do this to I can train someone to do this just as well. And the key is to train your employees to think like you do. This means stepping into leadership and guiding them to problem solve like you would, empowering them to handle tasks independently. And yes, mistakes will happen. That's part of the process. But over time, they're going to improve, and so will your confidence in delegating. To get yourself to the next level, you've got to release the perfectionism and the fear that your employee will not do the work as good as you will. You're right, they're not. They're not going to do it as good as you will. But that's not what's required of the work that's being delegated. You will be able to handle any mistakes that come up. Mistakes are part of the learning process, and it's also going to help you become a better trainer and a better leader the more often you do this. And when you delegate using this 4-step process, their work product will improve. So let's talk about the benefits of effective delegation. So, first of all, you are going to gain more time for strategic thinking. So, instead of being bogged down in those day to day tasks like sending out invoices or updating clients, you are going to have time to focus on business development, building new client relationships, and other high level work that only you can do. Second, when delegation is done right, your team feels trusted and valued. That leads to better morale and more engaged team. Delegating effectively empowers employees to take ownership of their roles, and that is going to pay dividends down long term in your practice. Okay. It's hard to see these things when you're making a snap decision about what to delegate. But the more you delegate according to this four-step process, the more responsibility employees are going to be able to take. And you're going to be able to also weed out employees that don't need to be in your practice. Because I know some of the lawyers that I work with hold on to employees for far too long. and, and that's going to be something that you're going to see clear as day when you implement this process. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, delegation helps you harmonize your work and your life. So once you've started handing off tasks that drain your time and your energy, then you can take a step back, you can focus on the bigger picture, and you can take time for yourself. One of my clients, after delegating routine administrative tasks, was able to take weekends off for the first time in years. And because her assistant had her guidance, right? She practiced what I'm going to be sharing with you here today. This assistant felt empowered to take the initiative on other tasks that needed to get done in the practice. My client's leadership, which is a learned skill, right? You don't have to just know leadership. It's not just something that you pop out of the box within law school. They don't give that to you. So you actually need to learn this skill. And it allowed her practice to continue growing. And she started growing that confidence that she needed to continue growing her team. So now she's thinking about hiring on an associate and is looking at how to do that effectively. And now that we've addressed this fear, which I'm sure that, many of you listening to this have, let's talk about the how of delegation. Let's talk about these 4 steps to delegate effectively and simply. Step one is identifying tasks you can delegate. It's important that you identify these ahead of time so that you can make a plan to delegate them. Ask yourself, what does not require me? And at first, you may want to hold on to everything. You're going to need to adjust this way of thinking. Start small and build competence in your employee and confidence in your ability to train and to lead. Tasks like follow up, scheduling, or even drafting documents can often be handled by someone else. Like you can put these things in the hands of someone else. And when you start to think about these ahead of time, instead of just, coming into your office Monday morning and thinking about what needs to get done, it also allows you to think ahead of time how to explain what needs to get done. So, and that brings me to step two, communicate clearly. Delegation doesn't mean just giving a task to someone or even telling them how to do it. Effective delegation requires you to break down the task into clear, actionable steps, step by step. That's what an SOP is. The more detailed you are in the very beginning when you're training your employee, the less confusion they are going to have and the fewer follow up questions. You're going to have much fewer questions if you have an SOP that has thoughtfully thought through how you want to train this person to think like you when doing this task. You really want to think about it. Written instructions are amazing for repetitive tasks. So your employee can refer to the written instructions instead of asking you when they get stuck. And one of the biggest misunderstandings that I see lawyers have is that they believe just because their assistant worked for another attorney in the past, that they're going to know how to handle your work. And that's simply not true. Assistants have doubts, they have fears just like anybody else, and they are going to need direction from you to help them alleviate those doubts that they're not doing things right and that they should be taking on tasks that you haven't yet explicitly delegated. This requires communication. And this is a fabulous thing to develop with your assistant. And I see far fewer lawyers doing this than need to. And I get it. You're busy. You've got a lot going on. But if you want to develop your practice and take yourself to the next level, you have got to develop this key skill of communication and do it consistently. That brings me to step 3, and this is crucial because you're not just delegating tasks, you're delegating authority. And you want to delegate some authority, not authority over your whole practice, but over particular tasks within your practice. Give your team the autonomy to make decisions within their role. And if you're not clear on their role and you're not clear on exactly what you want them doing, then your assistant definitely isn't going to be clear on their role. If you keep them tethered to you for every tiny decision and for how to do things, you are still holding on to the control that you need to let go of. And your job here is to teach your employee to think like you, right? And that's a lot of the work that I do with the lawyers that, come to me who are building teams or training teams is really understanding how you think about a task like intake. How do you approach it? What are the things you're thinking about? What's the mindset you're going into intake with? And then translating that into an SOP for your assistant. This is a methodical process because you need to understand how you think about problems and then how to articulate how to train them. And it's 1000% worth your time to do this because you're going to multiply your time back when you do it successfully. You're going to make all that money back too. So you really have to understand the importance of this so that you can up-level your practice. And finally, that brings me to step 4, evaluate. This all comes back to communication. Delegating effectively does not mean abdicating your responsibility to lead your team. It doesn't mean abdicating your responsibility to growing your law practice or to your clients. What it requires is that you not only consistently communicate your needs to your employees, but also communicating what they're doing well, what needs to improve, and then checking in on them as a human. What is their bandwidth to take on new projects? How are they feeling about their performance? How would they rate their performance? You need to get an idea of what's going on inside of their head too. And then you also want to take that time, preferably in a weekly meeting. I know a lot of lawyers, you're not doing this, and I highly encourage you to do this. Even if it's just for 20 minutes, you want to be on the same page with your assistant. But reviewing projects with them during that time, step by step, to help them make the necessary improvements. This makes a night and day improvement. I've just seen it with so many of my clients who have done this. I know this makes an impact. So if you're not doing this, do it. And this weekly meeting that I'm telling you about, it's not only going to help their performance, but it's going to help your performance because you're going to be more in sync with your goals. You're going to be more in sync with your employees, and you're going to get tasks done much more simply and easily. So let's talk about building confidence in your team, because a crucial part of this delegation, these 4 steps of delegation, is building confidence in your team. And your employees, they want to succeed. Know that. They want to succeed. They want to prove that they can take on more responsibility and grow. And when you give them that opportunity, they will rise to the occasion. And for those who don't, well, that gives you an indicator on whether or not they're a best fit for your practice. One of my clients had an assistant who was not taking on responsibilities in her litigation practice that she wanted her to take on. And my client thought that she just didn't have the right people in the right seats, but that wasn't true at all, it turns out. Because as I started talking to her about them, what I discovered was that she wasn't communicating what she wanted or making time to train her employees properly. And this explained why her assistant was making so many mistakes, taking longer than expected to get one task completed, and not proactively looking for work. Her assistant did not feel confident that she was doing her current job correctly, so she felt paralyzed, like she couldn't really do anything about it. But once my client addressed these issues, her assistant felt more confident and could take on more work. And my client felt more at ease leaving the office, taking that time away, because she knew that her assistant was getting the work done. So it's your job as a leader to create this culture of open communication and to invest in your team's growth. And the better you train them, the more you are going to feel comfortable delegating. And as you step into your role as a leader, you're going to begin seeing your team taking initiative, handling tasks that you thought that you could only do for the longest time. And you're going to watch yourself be able to step away from your practice and do those things that are in your zone of genius. This is a compound effect, my friend, is the beautiful thing. So let's talk about the key takeaways of this episode. First of all, delegating is not about giving up authority or responsibility. It's about empowering your team to support you so you can focus on the work that keeps revenue coming in. By dropping the perfectionism, delegating the right tasks, and stepping into leadership to train your team, you are going to free up time and grow your practice without the stress. I encourage you to take one small step this week, right? Just this week, a small step, and delegate a task. Something that maybe you've been putting off, you've been thinking like, oh, maybe I could do it. Pick something that's been sitting on your desk for far too long and give it to someone on your team. Track how much time it saves and notice the difference in your workload. And this might not be something you see overnight. It might be something that you see as a learning opportunity. I had a client who was talking about his billing and how he wanted to turn it over to his manager, his office manager. And this was something he was going to have to explain and to train this person, but they knew that if he actually stopped doing all of this work, he would save like 20 hours a month. And so it was just an investment of maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes to train this person, and then maybe an additional 30 minutes throughout the month just to kind of track and check what's going on, and yet still had a huge time savings. So if you're listening to this, you may have been putting yourself last on your to-do list for way too long, okay? And that voice inside of you, the one that is dreaming of having your life back, is your higher self telling you that it's time for change. And I know you're exhausted, feeling like you don't even have the energy to go after that dream life right now. In fact, even listening to this podcast, you squeezed this in just so you could get like a quick tip, something that you could hang on to maybe get a little bit of help. But here's the truth. Waiting to get the help that you need, to get the support that you need, will not magically bring you the time or the freedom that you desire. Okay, think about it. All those dreams of success, more revenue, more freedom, they're going to stay dreams if you don't take action. If you keep putting yourself off, you're only building momentum towards keeping the life you already have. You're not building momentum towards building anything new, towards anything different, towards something even bigger, right? So the right time to do this is never going to just appear. It's always up to us to seize opportunities. It's always up to us to find ways to make things happen because they don't just happen. And we miss out on so much when we don't take action. And this is all bringing me to inviting you to a strategy session, because taking that step to work with a coach, to work with me, is something that you can't wait on. Like, if you want to change things, you can't wait on it. I think about my clients like Andrea, who, if she had just kept putting off waiting to work with me, she would have missed out on an additional $65,000 a year in revenue by missing a tweak that we made when we were working together. So it's those kinds of things that you are going to miss out on if you don't seek support. Or I think of Nancy. And if she hadn't decided to take action and book a strategy session with me and work with me, she wouldn't have the podcast that's now helping thousands of people make better decisions with their estates. Or I think of my client Shannon, who wouldn't be living her dream life, right? She wouldn't be loving her practice and spending more time with her family. Instead, she would be stressing out about litigation. She wouldn't be being able to pay attention to her family because she'd be worried about emails. She wouldn't be able to go on trips without her laptop. Like, these are the kinds of tangible changes you can make in your life when you have the support that you need, but you've got to take action to get that support. It doesn't just happen, right? You have to take action on that. And if you're serious about having your life back, if you're serious about making these changes and gaining the freedom that you want for yourself, I want to invite you to a strategy session. You can book a call at dinacataldo.com/strategy session. Let's work together because the biggest results that we see in our life do not come from waiting, sitting back, or even listening to a podcast, which I love podcasts. I wouldn't be doing one if I didn't love them myself. The best results I received was when I took action on what was in the podcast, not just listening to them and not even just implementing what was in the podcast, which I encourage you to do. I want you to do that with this podcast. But I didn't wait and go back and listen to all the podcasts and implement everything I heard in the podcast because that would keep me unfocused. What kept me focused was working with the coaches that I knew were my kind of people, were the people that I knew who were going to draw the best out of me, the people who were going to be compassionate, the people who were going to be kind, but then also be the kind of person who holds me to a higher standard, holds me to a standard that maybe I'm not used to holding myself up to yet. And that's what coaching is all about, is me being the person for you to help you uplift yourself, to really create the life that you want to create. And if that's something that you want, if you're listening to this and this is resonating with you, I want to invite you to book that strategy call with me right now. You can go to dinacataldo.com/strategy session, and we will talk about building your future. All right, my friend, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. Bye.